everybody. Welcome to Saying Yes to Life. I am Delisa Renideo, and I'm here in my garden in Vilcabamba, Ecuador. So welcome to my garden. Have you ever stopped to think about the difference between reacting and responding? Most people haven't actually given that much thought, and they kind of use them interchangeably. But that difference can change everything in our lives, in our bodies, in our relationships, and actually even in our world. So a reaction is something that just happens automatically without any thought. So for example, you know how when you hit your put your hand and hit your right below your knee, or when the doctor taps you under your knee and your leg jerks forward, that's a reaction. Or when you touch something hot on the stove or something and you instantly pull your hand away, that's a reaction too. It's built into your nervous system to protect you, so it's a good thing. And there's no conscious choice involved in it. A response, on the other hand, is different. It is a choice. So let's say after you burned your hand and you reacted by pulling it away, you might then respond by choosing to put your hand in some cold water. That's a conscious choice. That's a response. That requires awareness. We also have emotional reactions, things that we don't think about. So, for instance, maybe if somebody cuts you off in traffic and we might instantly just feel angry or want to yell at them, that's our emotional reflex. It's a reaction. But we can also choose a conscious response instead. I've talked about this in a previous episode. If something like this happens, we can pause, maybe take a breath to get ourselves a little more calmed down, and then say to ourselves, I don't know why that person did that. But what I do know is that it's not a safe situation, and I'm going to drive extra carefully and calmly. That's a really different energy from the typical road rage reaction. So, are you familiar with Viktor Frankl? He is one of my heroes, and he wrote a wonderful book called Man's Search for Meaning. He's a man who survived the Nazi concentration camps, and then he went on to teach other people about human freedom. And he said, in this quote, between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom. I'm going to repeat that. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. And it's in that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom. I love that. Isn't that beautiful? That little space between what happens and what we choose to do about it. That's where our power lies. That's where we can choose love instead of fear, or peace instead of panic, or clarity instead of confusion. So I'm going to share a story from my own life that taught me this in a really profound way. I grew up in Alaska, and when I was 13 years old, I was in the 1964 Alaskan earthquake. And it was 9.2 on the Richter scale, which was the largest one ever recorded in North America. So it was tremendously strong. But not only that, it lasted for 5.5 minutes. Do you know how long 5.5 minutes is when the ground is moving violently and rolling under your feet? I was absolutely terrified and really petrified. I couldn't even move. And in those endless minutes, I literally believed it was the end of the world. And of course, I had had some difficult situations in my life before. I knew that bad things can happen, but I always had trusted the earth beneath my feet. And when that earthquake came, that shattered my trust, and something inside me changed. Because after that day, even if I felt the tiniest tremor, even if someone was just walking heavily on a floor that wasn't real stable, my heart would race. I'd freeze until I was sure that it wasn't going to get worse. This went on for years. But many years later, like decades later, as part of my spiritual practice, I was using affirmations. And every night before I'd go to sleep, I'd silently repeat to myself, all is well in my world. All is well in my world. And then I'd fall asleep. I didn't choose that affirmation because of my fear of earthquakes. It was just simply a way to get centered and remind myself that I lived in a friendly universe. So I said that every night for years. And then one morning, very early, like 2 a.m., I woke up to the bed shaking and the sound of dishes rattling in the cupboard. Another earthquake. And in that moment, instead of terror, my first thought was, all is well in my world. I was just amazed. I realized that I had healed that old emotional reaction. The terror was gone. My body and my mind had learned a new pattern, a peaceful response instead of that terror reaction. And I remember thinking at that time, wow, this is so incredible. This is what real freedom feels like. And of course, right now, we're living in a world that can feel and be very chaotic, full of rapid changes, conflict seemingly everywhere, and definitely uncertainty. Definitely uncertainty. That means certainly uncertainty. Okay. It's easy to get swept up in this and maybe to feel fear or terror or outrage at the choices that certain people are making, or just a sense of hopelessness. The news, social media, and even just the energy around us can keep us constantly reacting. But we do have a choice. Every time something like this happens, we can choose to pause, maybe breathe to get centered, and choose our response. And when we do, we are reclaiming our power. We're actually reclaiming our freedom to be free of other people's uh, choices. And in that moment, we're bringing calm into the chaos that's around us. And we can bring love into places that fear wanted to take over. And every time we choose peace instead of panic, or we choose compassion instead of criticism, or we choose understanding instead of judgment, we become part of the healing of this world rather than adding our upset to the collective pain of the world. So you probably realize that every week I give you an invitation. So this week I invite you to just notice your reactions, these unthought out decisions that you make without consciously deciding them. Your reactions in traffic or in conversations, or maybe even in your so-called private thoughts. The reason I say so-called is because those thoughts have energy, and those thoughts don't stay in your head. The energy goes out away from us. Even those thoughts, when you notice your reactions, see if you can just pause, take a breath to get centered, and find that little space between the stimulus and this response that Viktor Frankl was talking about. And then make a choice that reflects who you truly are inside. Because every conscious response, every moment of awareness is an act of love. It's a way of saying yes to your life. And each time you do this, it helps to steady the world, starting with yourself, with your own heart. So just thank you for being here with me today. Thank you for sharing this with anybody that you think might benefit from it. And I will see you again soon.